Morning, church.
Morning.
Great to see everybody here this morning. Our 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, you guys can head on upstairs. While everybody else gets to listen to that noise. It's fun. Probably not a good noise, but we're going to do it. Hey, we are so excited to have you here today. If you've not been here the last couple weeks, we have been talking about fear, specifically fear we experience. Today is the last part of this 4-part series talking about fear. And today we're going to talk about overcoming the fear of intimacy. All right, overcoming the fear of intimacy. But like we've been doing for every sermon in this series, we're going to start with this verse as kind of our foundation, all right, for how we're approaching all of this. In 2 Timothy 1:7, you are probably getting tired of hearing this verse because we've been using it over and over and over again, but I'm going to do it again. All right, so let's deal with it. All right? It says, "For God did not give us a spirit of fear," or this translation says, "for a spirit of timidity, but instead He has given us a spirit of power and of love and of sound mind." And as you can see in this copyright of the NIV, a spirit of power, of love, and of self-discipline. All right, so God has not given us a spirit of fear. Instead, He has given us so much better stuff. He's given us power. He's given us love. He's given us self-discipline. I really appreciated the way that Lyle explained that fear of God and how that fear draws us closer to God. And then when we get closer to God, His perfect love drives out all that fear. You know, so that's like the more we get to know Him, the more we get to see that perfect love. And so we connect with God on that level so we can connect with other people, right? But ultimately what ends up happening is that, and it's not new to our generation, it won't be new to the next generation, but what is happening is we have so many people that aren't first connecting with God. That's not the most important relationship in their life, maybe not even top 5, top 10, maybe not even a relationship at all. And so they're not connecting with God, and then it's going to be that much harder to connect intimately with other people. And so when that happens, people kind of develop this fear of intimacy because people will let you down. People will hurt you. And so this is kind of usually the way it works. People that have this fear of intimacy, they kind of go through this thought process. They go something like this. You know, if they only knew me, if they knew the real me, if they knew what my thoughts were when I'm driving down Route 36 and I've got cones just stuck in the middle of the road, I'm working on them. You know, you're just driving and there's cones. If they knew what was going through my head at that moment, they would not think that I'm a very good person, right? You know, or we have other, you know, we have dreams, and we say, man, if they knew what my dreams were, would they still accept me? Would they still love me? If they knew what my fears were, would they still accept me or would they reject me? If I opened my heart up to them and I shared my insecurities, if I trusted people, would I get hurt or not? I've been hurt before, so I don't know if I should trust people again. And it kind of leads to a lot of issues because people have this fear of being intimate with people because of past experiences or because of insecurities. I want to talk specifically about how that affects us in a marriage. Right, in the relationship with your spouse. You know, they say that the 2 easiest places to get in fights are prison and in marriage, right? Like, I'm glad you guys like that first service, man. That joke bombed. I'm like, oh boy, let's pray for him, right? You know, they say that though. But think about it. A lot of people desire a great relationship. Right? They want a great marriage. They don't go into it thinking, I'm just going to do the least amount possible. This is probably going to be terrible, but let's give it a shot. You know, like, I don't really care if it works out. Like, I've done a lot of weddings. Those usually aren't the vows, right? That's not the case. People desire this great covenant style of marriage, but oftentimes what ends up happening is that maybe they've seen their parents go through stuff, or maybe they had a brother or sister who went through a really difficult marriage, or they have friends who have gone through this incredibly painful relationship, and they look at that and they think, you know what, I don't know if I want my kids to go through that. Or they look at it and say, you know, I don't want to go through it because they got betrayed. You know, they put all their trust in that person, and they got betrayed. And I don't know if I can have that type of intimacy only to get betrayed. Because what if we wake up one day and we don't like each other? What if we wake up one day, or what if we get married and we're fighting all the time? Or what if, over the course of our marriage we end up not being attracted to one another? What if he or she's unfaithful? Or the big one lady asked, what if he ends up just like his dad? Like some real stuff right there, right? But if I were to ask everybody, how many of you have been burned or hurt by a bad relationship? Not just a romantic or a relationship with a spouse or a partner, but I'm talking like a relationship like a friend, a coworker, a family person that you thought you could trust. Probably all of us have been hurt on a really deep level at some point in our lives. And so I want to acknowledge that with that, the pain is real. Right? That pain is real. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I'm not going to act like it's not there, because the pain that comes from a broken relationship or a betrayed trust in a relationship, if it's not the greatest pain we experience, it's awfully close, right? And so in the Old Testament, we read this story about a guy who went through this type of pain. All right, his name is Job. You're probably familiar with his story. He invited some of his closest friends in to be in like a really intimate, close relationship with him. All right, and one day, events that were totally outside of his ability to control. And we've already established that we can't control everything. We're really not in control of a lot. All these things were happening outside of his ability to control, and his life is just seemingly just falling apart. And these friends that he's invited into the closest part of his life, these intimate friends, rather than standing by him, what do? They criticize him. They accuse him of wrongdoing. They gossip about him. They talk about him behind his back, saying all sorts of bad things. And so we get this in Job 19:19. Job says this, and you can see the pain coming through. The pain that comes through a broken relationship. Job 19:19, he says, all of my intimate friends detest me. Those I love have turned against me. As you read that, you can almost hear the hurt. That's kind of what it is, right? All my intimate friends detest me. Those I love have turned against me. The hurt is actually pretty obvious, right? As we look at that, I don't know what that was, all right? But as we look at that verse, the hurt is obvious, right? All my intimate friends detest me. Those I love have turned against me. That probably, we feel that. But there's also a little bit of an underlying idea there of fear. Because think about it this way. He's saying, all my intimate friends detest me. Those I love have turned against me. There's a little bit of fear there because those are his intimate friends. Those are his close friends. Those are the people the closest to him, and they detest him. So what is everybody else thinking? The people that he loves have turned against him. You can almost hear the fear there, in addition to the hurt. Kind of a, what am I going to do now? I had these intimate friends that I thought would be there for me, and they detest me. I have people that I love, and they don't love me back. They've turned against me. There are a lot of people that live in this world. They live with this type of pain. They don't have close relationships. The people that they've drawn in close to them have hurt them. They've turned against them. The people they love and care for turned against them. So what happens is a lot of people living in this world, they build walls. They build walls around their lives, around their hearts, because they want to protect themselves. And they're not going to let you in. Or maybe that's describing you. You're not going to let people in when you're feeling that way. It's kind of keeping people at an arm's distance. Keep people away from you because last time you let them in, last time you had intimate friends, they ended up detesting you. Last time you loved someone, they hurt you. And so they build these walls. And we're going to look at how to overcome this. We're going to look at how to overcome this type of fear that comes from being hurt by previous relationships. But first, as I was working on this, I recognized that we have to prove that this type of fear is harmful, right? Because a lot of people that have been hurt like this, they build these walls and they live protected. They're not living an incredibly awesome life, right? But they're living protected because they built those walls to protect protect their heart. And so they look at it and they say, you know what? Like, this is probably not how God wants me to live, but at least I'm not getting hurt by the people that I should be closest to. So we have to prove that this type of fear can harm us. We're gonna look at the Genesis story, or the creation story in Genesis. If you're familiar with the story, which hopefully you are, that God created Adam and said, hey Adam, like, this is good, but you need a helper, you need a person, you need a companion. And so he creates Eve, Adam and Eve, and he says, you guys create, you multiply, you subdue the earth, you rule all over, you have all sorts of babies, and you have lots of fun, you can do everything, except for one thing. Don't eat from that tree. Alright, I am just like contrary by nature, right? Like, if somebody says don't do something, I'm doing it. Don't touch that wall, it's wet paint. You're like, bet, you know? Yeah, it was. Yeah, it sure was. Thursday at football practice, we had to practice indoors because it was storming and it was just crazy. One of the teachers brought in a box, okay? And she brought it into them, and they looked at it, and they just set it down by the wall. I am curious, okay? It was driving me crazy to not know what was in that box. I had other responsibilities, I had things I was supposed to be doing, but I kept thinking, what is in that box, right? So I slowly made my way over there so I could find out what was in that box. You know what was in that box? Papers. Like, I don't know, it was just like, I was expecting something really cool, like, it's a map, no, it was just like boring papers. But that's how we are, right? It's like, hey, don't do that. What do we want to do? We want to go do that. Don't look in there, don't open that, we want to open it. So that's what happens here. He says, you guys can do anything. You can do anything, just don't eat from that tree. And the serpent comes along, and sure enough, it's like, hey, did God really say you can't eat from this tree? And Adam and Eve sinned. Okay? They gave in to their curiosity. They gave in. They disobeyed the very simple command that God gave them, and they sinned. And at that moment, intimacy with God was broken. Right? That's what sin does. Sin separates us from God. All right? It did for Adam and Eve, and it does for us. Our sin separates us from God. That intimacy is gone with God because we are sinners. And because they were sinners. So that's what we see here. That fear of intimacy can make us distant. All right, and here's where we see that. In Genesis chapter 3, verses 9 through 10, this is really more of the fall of man than it is necessarily the creation story. But Genesis 3, 9 through 10, it says, the Lord God called out to the man, where are you? This is after they've eaten from the tree that they weren't supposed to. God calls out to him, he says, where are you? Adam answers, he says, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid. I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. He was afraid because he was naked, so he hid. He distanced himself from God because that intimacy was broken. All right? He hid himself from Eve. That intimacy was gone. I was afraid because I was naked. Our fear of intimacy can cause us to keep people at a distance. Our fear of intimacy causes us sometimes to keep God at a distance. I don't know if this is just me or not. I doubt it is, but if you've ever been saying a prayer and you've been struggling with something, you've been chewing on something, you say a prayer just thinking, okay, I'm just going to talk about this nice little tidy thing. All right, but there's other things gnawing at us. It's really hard to pray and be intimate with God, focus on that when you have this other really pressing issue. And so what ends up happening a lot of times is rather than dealing with that issue, people just become more and more distant with God. They start talking to him less and less. And that's what we see Adam doing. All right, that fear of that intimacy is broken, and so he hides. He keeps a safe distance. I've shared this illustration before, but you know what? I'm going to share it again. All right, because as I read this story, I always kind of think about the same type of thing. I was thinking about the fear of intimacy and how that connects and relates and how we need to be vulnerable. You know, I was trying to think about maybe a time when I felt the most vulnerable. All right, and it was certainly my middle school years. Middle school was rough, right? If you have a middle school in your life, man, show them some extra love because middle school is no joke. Okay, like that is without a doubt some of the hardest time to be a human on this earth. All right, so if you know middle school, give them some love. All right, but I the house I grew up in eastern Knox County, all right? Howard County, someone got to say last week, all right? That guy, all right? Eastern Knox County, we had this awesome space to play flashlight tag, all right? And so in the summer, we'd have all our friends over, and we'd have one really powerful flashlight. You had to run around, you had to find people hiding and say their name. And if you did that and you shine a light on them, they were out, and they had to try to get back to a base without being caught. I'm not trying to be bragging, but I was really good at it, all right? Really good. We were doing that one summer, and I had a bunch of friends over, and there was a girl there that I liked, all right? And I thought, you know what, this is gonna be my night, all right, to show just how awesome I am. Flashlight tag, right? Who doesn't want a guy who's good at flashlight tag? So we got ready for the flashlight tag, and I had these pants. I don't know if they make them anymore. I may have been part of the reason they don't exist. They're called rip-away pants, all right? They're like regular pants, except you see here where there's a seam. They had buttons, right? So you could just, just rip them off, all right? I think they were for like basketball players, real hoop dream type story. You're playing basketball or getting ready to, you gotta rip your pants off. The idea is though you have shorts on under this, okay? Don't miss that part, all right? So we were getting ready to play flashlight tag, and I grew up in a home where I had to do chores, right? And one of my chores was I did all my own laundry, all right? So I thought, well, I'm not gonna wear a pair of shorts under my pants. Like, then I have to wash 2 things of clothes, fold 2 things of clothes, put them away. Some of you guys know where this is going. You're like, oh boy, here we go, right? So I just wore my rip-away pants. They were dark, and we were outside, and everything was going great. And I'm getting ready to turn the corner and run to the base. And on that base, I see that girl, all right? And she's just sitting there waiting to be wowed, all right? All right? So I take off running. And the deck is only, it's like that high. So I'm like, I'm gonna jump up on it. It looked really cool in my head. I'm gonna jump up on it. I'm gonna slide on my hip. I'm gonna kind of do one of these and go, ladies, as I slide across. And then she's just gonna be like, oh, he's the best flashlight tag player ever, right? That's how it worked in here. What happened was I ran. And the first part went good. I jumped up, and I popped on the deck, and I started sliding, and something on my rip-away pants caught. And rip-away pants did exactly what the name says. They ripped away. All right? I stood up with my t-shirt, my tighty-whities, and my tennis shoes, and said, ladies, well, I didn't really say ladies. I wasn't that quick with it. It was also half naked. So I think what any junior higher would do, I ran. I went down into the basement, hid in my room, and I did not come out of that room for like 3 days, right? I was really embarrassed by that. But it is funny because I felt incredibly vulnerable. Obviously, sitting there half naked in front of somebody will make you feel incredibly vulnerable. But my response was to stay away from those people. Right? Like, I did not want to be around that group of friends for a while. I did not want to be around anybody. And up until 30 seconds ago, I didn't really want to share that story with people, right? That's something that we keep people at a distance because, I felt vulnerable, I was embarrassed by it, so I didn't want to be around those people. Oftentimes, as this carries over and this translates, and you're wondering how this connects, when we're vulnerable with people, sometimes it won't go good, right? Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't go good. When it doesn't go good, sometimes we have that same response that Adam had, that I had, right? When you're vulnerable or when something happens, you just want to stay away from people. You don't want to let people in. You don't want to connect with them because it feels weird and it feels awkward. And so we end up hiding behind a lot of different things. So my question for you is, what are you hiding? What are you hiding behind? Are you hiding behind an image? Are you hiding behind an attitude? Are you hiding behind false confidence? Are you hiding behind your money? Are you hiding behind your addictions? Are you hiding behind greed? Are you hiding behind a lie? Our fear of intimacy can make us really distant. And the other thing it can do, the other reason that we need to change it is because it can make us very defensive. All right? It can make us very defensive. We can see that, again, as we continue on in Genesis chapter 3. We read verses 12 through 13. We see the first ever game played here. All right? The man said, basically, it's not my fault. It's the woman's fault. He says this in verse 12. He says, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some of the fruit from the tree, and I ate it. All right, now I want you to read that and think about it this way, okay? Because I have spent time with passive-aggressive people, all right? And when I read that, I hear that he is accepting little to zero responsibility. And he's almost blaming God, right? Like, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree. You know, that's kind of gutsy, or really not. I don't know, right? Like, to blame God for it. The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it. And then God goes to the woman, and he says, what is this that you've done? And the woman says, well, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. She says, the serpent deceived me, and I ate it. In other words, it's not my fault. The devil made me do it. I can't be held responsible for something the serpent made me do. All right, so we see here that because that intimacy is broken, it's starting to cause all these issues. One of them is distance. One of them is being defensive. But think about that. How often do you hear that in relationships? Well, it's not my fault. It's not my fault that it's not going well. It's their fault. If they were different, if they acted different, if they pay more attention to me, if they take less attention to that, they always do this, or they'll never do that. It's their fault. That's kind of what we're doing, isn't it? We're playing the blame game. It started in the Garden of Eden. Adam blamed Eve blamed the snake, and now we blame it on other stuff as well. And so that's what our fear of intimacy can do, right? It can cause us to be distant, and it can make us defensive. And so we're going to look at overcoming that. All right, how do we overcome that? And we're actually going to start with my second thought on this. All right, my second thought, because my first thought is actually ties a little more to the invitation. The second thought is that we must take relational risk. All right, we must take prayerful relationship risk, not just random haphazard risk, but real relational risk based on prayer. We have to pray about who we invest our heart in, knowing that it will take a risk, right? If we want genuine intimacy in any relationship, we have to take a risk, right? I mean, if you want to get like super theologically deep here, you can look at, again, the creation story. When God decided to create humankind, he didn't make it where he said, you have to love me. I'm going to program your brain so you have to love me, you have to have an intimate relationship with me. No, he gave us free will, right? In our relationships, we cannot be in control of every single thing and achieve intimacy. We cannot continuously try to hold the upper hand and achieve intimacy. We can't secretly have a backup plan, an escape route, or a backup person, or a fallback person, and achieve real intimacy. We have to take prayerful risk, because when we risk, we're vulnerable. And yeah, we could be hurt, but that's a risk that we can't afford not to take. Right? Like, it's scary to risk that. It's scary to put your heart out there with somebody that you love and care about. But it's even scarier not to risk it. I think of it this way. I have somewhat of an irrational fear of heights. Okay, I don't really like being up high in general. I don't like flying. But I want you to imagine that you go on an airplane, right? You're flying, and the captain comes over the speaker, and he's like, hey, plane's going down. We got like 5 minutes, but the plane is without a doubt going to crash into this mountain or into this field. The good news is we have parachutes, right? We have parachutes for everybody, and so you just roll your window down, or whatever you do, however you get off the plane, I don't know, all right? You're going to open up the trunk, and you're going to jump out, all right? Now think about it. It's scary to jump out of a plane, I'm sure. Never done it, all right? It's scary to jump out of a plane, but it's even scarier in that situation not to, right? It's going to be a whole lot scarier to crash into the side of a mountain than it is to jump. And that's kind of how it is with relationships. It's really scary to risk in relationships. And it is so much scarier not to risk in the long run. It's a lot scarier to go through life alone or to go through life never experiencing that real intimacy. Oftentimes, not all single people, but some single people talk about that feeling of being lonely, and that it just kind of eats at them. And that's real. But I've also seen a lot of married people who are just as lonely, if not more lonely. They live their life with their spouse, they go to bed, they lay down next to their spouse, and they feel even more loneliness because they've never taken a risk. They've never connected with them. They've never been vulnerable with their spouse and told them about their heart, their fears, their insecurities. And so they end up just going through their whole marriage, their whole life, just living with someone and never really connecting and having that intimate relationship. People who give up hope on their spouse, thinking they're never going to change, they never want to connect. Just imagine how insulting that is to God. To say to God, like, I know you created everything, I know that you're all powerful, but God, you're not big enough to change my spouse's heart. You're not big enough for me to overcome this fear of intimacy. And I want you to think about intimacy because there are people that go through their whole lives as Christ followers, never really have intimate relationships with other followers of Christ. And think about it. How does that work? How can we expect to do what God has called us to do? How can we expect to be who God has called us to be without ever having a serious, intimate relationship with God's people? All right, at our church, we develop intimacy together in a lot of ways. One of them is serving together. And we're big on serving, right? So whether it's, the third Saturday of the month with the food pantry and serving just hundreds of people in our community, whether it's getting together and putting on the war paint, going into that preschool room, right, and serving with somebody. You want to develop intimacy with somebody, man, you go serve in the preschool room or the junior high class, right? And you will develop some intimacy together. We've been doing life groups. This whole idea of doing life better in circles rather than in rows. It's going to be scary to risk. It's scary to risk a lot of times, but it is a whole lot scarier to go through life without an intimate connection with God's people. And that's what he wants us to have. Paul defined some of that this way in 1 Corinthians 13:7, the love chapter. You'll hear it read at just about every wedding you ever go to. But really, the love chapter is discussing us, right? The church, the Christians, how we're supposed to act. All right, so this says that love, when it says is, talking about love. Love always protects. Love always trusts. Love always hopes. Love always perseveres. I want you to think about the closest relationship you have. The most intimate relationship that you have. If you're married, hopefully that's with your spouse. All right, if you're not married, maybe you're thinking of a best friend, a sibling, a parent, a child, something like that. But think of the closest, most intimate relationship that you have. Is this true of your relationship? That you always protect it? Is it true of that relationship that you always trust and are trustworthy? Is it true that you always hope? Is it true that that relationship always perseveres? Because our relationships are to be built on love. The divorce rates in our country would specify that that's not true for a lot of people, Christian and non-Christian alike. That's not true, that people aren't living their relationships that way, that they're not connecting. So it's scary to risk. But man, it is so much scarier not to risk. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people live today. Here's another thought on intimacy that I'd like for us to embrace, and that is we have to avoid premature intimacy. All right, avoid premature intimacy. We talked about taking a prayerful relationship risk. What we don't do is we don't go up to a perfectly new stranger and say, hey, it's nice to meet you. Hold on, let me vomit my life story onto you, right? It's like I'm just here at Walmart, pick up some light bulbs, and I now know your deepest, darkest fears and where you have been every day since the age of 3. This is fantastic, right? That's what a lot of people do, right? It's like they go from one end of the spectrum to the other. It's like, I'm never going to trust anybody, I'm never going to share anything with anybody, or I'm going to share everything with everybody, right? And a lot of times people do that with love in their relationship. It's like, I just met you, but I love you. You love them? We love their Instagram profile. You know, you don't love them, you love their image. You love the idea of them, not the substance of them. You don't know them yet. I love what Solomon wrote when he was talking to the Shulamite woman in Song of Songs 8:4. He said, "Do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires." Do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. Here's a shocker. The right time to arouse or awaken love is not 5 minutes into the relationship, right? We have to avoid premature intimacy. Some people give their heart away every single time they meet someone. I love her. She smells so good. I don't know. She changed perfumes. I love him. His hair is so fluffy. I think that's a thing girls like, fluffy hair. Never mind. I don't love him anymore. He straightened his hair. I love him. He's got a nice job. He doesn't live at home with his mom in the basement. Never mind. I don't love him anymore. People end up playing Russian roulette with their emotions in these relationships. And so they engage in this premature relationship intimacy. And then what ends up happening is they settle for false intimacy in a relationship. False intimacy in a relationship leads to false intimacy outside of marriage. And that's going to start leading to a lot of issues for a lot of people. Because it's not real. It's not how God intended it. Here's what true intimacy looks like. True intimacy is saying, I lay down my life to serve you. Right? Christ died for the church. I'm willing to die for you. I'm laying down my life to serve you. I will submit my heart to you. I'll give my life, my heart, my soul, my being to you in a covenant of marriage, regardless of what your response is. And then you express that in a real and intimate form that God would have us do. We have to avoid premature intimacy, but we also need to take prayerful relationship risk if we want any sort of relationship return. There are a lot of people right now who, as weird as this sounds, they need to do the rip away, right? They need to do the rip away, okay? You got to be real with the people that you're closest to in your life. Talk about your fears. Talk about your hesitations. Put your trust in them. Because without that, we're going to struggle. So that was thought number 2. Thought number 1 is so everything I just said, before we do any of that, right? Before we can do any of that, we have to find our acceptance in Jesus Christ, right? Like, before we can prayerfully take a relationship risk and be vulnerable with people, we first have to find our acceptance and intimacy with Christ. Someone asked Jesus, what was the most important thing out of everything, all the laws and the commands and everything that anybody teaches, what's the most important thing? And Jesus said in Matthew 22:37, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Right? That's the first thing. That's the most important thing. That has to be the first thing in. We start with an intimacy with God, loving him with all of our being, all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind. And then the second most important thing is to love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. I always find that interesting because if you are someone who constantly criticizes yourself, you'll be convinced that everybody else is constantly criticizing you. If you don't trust yourself, you're going to be convinced that you can't trust anyone else either. And we have to work hard to find our acceptance in Jesus Christ. When I was in Bible college, Lincoln Christian University in Lincoln, Illinois, the only day I set foot on campus was the day to get my diploma. Right? Like, that's the way to do it, right? Show up, they give you a diploma. I did it all online through work experience and things like that. But one of the classes that I took, we had to film ourselves giving a sermon. And, they had us, do one before we did any real work on it. And then they would kind of evaluate. Each class was 8 weeks long. And we just kind of squeezed 16 weeks of stuff into 8 weeks. And this may come as a shocker to some of you. Some of you are going to say, no, you know what? I knew this evening. When I sent my first message video into him, sermon message video into him, and he said, Andy, you can't preach this way. you can't preach this way, right? And I was like, well, I've been doing it, but I disagreed wholeheartedly with him for his reason. He talked about something one of the weeks called a minister's mystique, right? And it's this whole idea, maybe Ken, you experienced that in Bible college, maybe you did too, but it's this whole idea that we're supposed to kind of guard, that the minister is supposed to be like kind of above some of those issues. They don't really struggle with that, and it's like, well, they don't really have those same troubles, and I can't do that, right? Like, I am an open book through and through. I tried it once or twice to pass the class, right? And I felt so disconnected. I felt so fake. I felt like a liar, right? Just not being real. And I want to tell you what I do today, right? As you probably noticed, I put it all online, right? I'm talking about standing in front of, a bunch of girls in my underwear, right? Like, I put it all online, for better, for worse. I stand up in front of you guys, as does Ken, and I know Lyle does, and we take a risk, right? We take a risk because we're going to be vulnerable. We're going to open up, we're going to share our heart. And you know what? Sometimes it hurts more than you could possibly imagine when people attack back, right? It does. Like, it does. You put all this into it, and it hurts when you get attacked back. And the criticism, sometimes it seems really unwarranted. It's really difficult. But let me tell you, I have sat in a lot of messages, sermons, heard a lot of speakers. I've heard some of the most eloquent speakers with some of the most amazing content ever, some of the best illustrations, and it didn't connect. It didn't connect because it didn't seem real. And then I sat and I listened to some people who said way more than I do, right? They struggle with that, they stutter, they're not nearly as smooth from one move to the next, the transitions aren't as polished. And those messages connect a whole lot more because they were real. And they were open, and they took a risk, and they connected with the people they were talking to. Now, the reason I'm telling any of us that is not for my sake, but for our sake. Because in our relationships, we can choose. We can choose to be fake, to be polished, and to just show people our Instagram life, right? Where everything's perfect, right? Or we can show them real lives. We can be real with them. We can connect with them. We can cry with them. We can cheer with them. We can be one with them. Now, the reason I'm able to stand up here and just be a complete doofus sometimes and share about stuff that is really, really intimate is because, I'll be honest with you, I don't generally care a lot what people think. I know that may sound crazy to some of you. I really don't. I really don't. I think about this verse in Romans 15:7. It says, accept one another just then as Christ accepted you. That's what matters, right? Not the opinions of people, but the opinions of Christ. And before Christ, I'm accepted. You're accepted. Christ has accepted us. And so I can talk about being vulnerable and taking relationship risks. And I can talk about, just pouring into people's lives and trusting people, even though you may get hurt. Because I can risk that from a position of security. Because my identity, my value is found in Christ. And so people may hurt you when you try to develop an intimate relationship with you. They may let you down. They may betray you. But where is your acceptance? It's in Christ. And so this morning, if you're here and you're listening to all this, and I just got to the end, and you're like, you know what, that was really good stuff, but my acceptance right now isn't found in Christ. I've not accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. And you probably think, man, I just wasted 45 minutes listening to this dude talk, right? Because all of that message is built around the last thing I taught. That our acceptance is found in Jesus Christ. And so if you're here this morning and you have not found that acceptance, or you've not accepted His grace, then we're going to have an invitation time for you. All right? And this is a really important time for people who are outside of the kingdom of God. All right? Who maybe recognize what God has done, but instead are choosing to live their own way. This is your opportunity to choose God, to pursue Him with everything that you have. All right, pursuing Him, confessing Him as Lord and Savior of your life, dying to yourself, being immersed, having the gift of the Holy Spirit, and your sins being forgiven. Then you can start to make relationship risks. You can start to be vulnerable. You can start to pour into people, start to trust people from a position of security. Because your identity, your acceptance is found not in that person, not in us, not in your spouse. Your identity, your acceptance is found in Christ and Christ alone. That is the most important, intimate relationship you can have. If you're going to do it right, that is the first and most important relationship. The reality is that for a lot of us, we've already accepted Christ as our Savior. But maybe right now, we're not putting that relationship first with everything we do. So we're having this invitation. I've already offered an invitation for people outside of the kingdom of God. For everybody else who is inside of the kingdom of God, think about that relationship that you have with Christ. Think about, are you giving Him all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your mind? Because this invitation time is for you. Let's stand as we sing.